All right, thank you. All right, maybe seated. Your next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Michelle, can you bring up Defendant's Exhibit 236, which has already been admitted?
Thank you.
Amber, I'm jumping back to the Boston plane incident just for a moment. We had a lot of different texts and a lot of exchange, but I just wanted to point out to you, this text message is from Mr. Depp to you, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this is on 5/25, the day after the Boston plane incident?
That's correct.
All right, and he is saying, once again, I find myself in a place of shame and regret. Of course, I am sorry. I really don't know why or what happened, but I will never do it again. I want to get better for you and for me. I must. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I can't do it again. I can't live like that again. I know you can't either. And I will for both of us, starting today. I love you. Again, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I love you and feel so bad for letting you down. Do you see that?
I do.
And was that the message that you testified to, that he gave you?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to jump back to where we left off. We're up in January of 2015. Danish girl, you're filming in London, is that correct?
Yes, that would have been January 2015.
Okay. Now, we heard some testimony from Isaac Baruch earlier about a telephone call that you had with Mr. Depp. Do you recall that call?
I do.
Can you please tell the jury and remember to tell them what Mr. Depp was saying on that call? And you can give the back. I didn't mean to cut you off on the context. Go ahead.
Is it okay to... The nature of the conversation was pleasant? Friendly, fine, normal. And then Johnny stopped making sense with this. Like, you know, he'd start a sentence and then trail off and act confused when I would be confused. And that pattern kind of increased pretty dramatically in a short amount of time. And I was in a hotel room in London speaking to him in Los Angeles. And the phone, what I assumed, cut off. I thought it was a connection issue. And I remember getting out of bed and walking into the bathroom to get something, and I was redialing him. And in the span of that short amount of time we had been disconnected, it was minutes, not even minutes. I called him back thinking the phone had been disconnected, and he answered and he said, how could you tell me that? How could you say that to me? Who the fuck is he? Who the fuck is he? And he asked me that a few times, and I was so confused. I didn't understand what he was talking about. I expressed that to him. He says, who is the guy, the one in New York that you're fucking? And it was such a bizarre conversation, because it had already started to feel like he was not making, it was almost as if he was confused by what sentence he had started by the time he got to the end of it. And then all of a sudden he tells me that I have just told him that I had a boyfriend or a lover in New York, and he's accusing me of having just told him about it, which was crazy to me. Not only was that not accurate, I would never have communicated with him like that. More or less called him on the phone to do it and then call him back and wonder, what the connection issue was. It was just the most bizarre thing. But he was so worked up, incoherent, and accusing me of having had this conversation with him. Eventually, the line drops out, and I spoke to the person who picked up the phone.
Okay. And how did that end?
I no longer spoke to Johnny. I probably can't say what the person told me.
Are we talking about Isaac Baruch?
Yes.
Okay. So without saying what he said, you had a brief conversation with Mr. Baruch, and that was the end of the call?
I did. It was my understanding Johnny was passed
Objection,
out.
hearsay.
Okay.
Sustain.
All right. January 25, 2015, Tokyo. Please tell, it's the premiere of Mordecai, correct? Did you accompany Mr. Depp to Tokyo for the premiere of Mordecai?
I did. When I was,
Please tell the jury about that trip.
well, I had just started to pick out the wedding dress right before that trip, and plans were moving for us to get married shortly after this trip. So we took this trip to promote his movie. I went with him. We got in an argument in the hotel room, and I said, I don't remember what I said to him, but I said something snotty to him that provoked him. It provoked him, and when I walked into the hallway, he grabbed me by the arm and slammed me up against the hallway wall, and I kind of struggled with him, tried to push him off of me, and I managed to get out of his grasp enough to take a few steps, and I kind of curved around and went into the closet. And by the time I made it into the closet, he had me by the hair, and what felt like he was just wailing on me, but in a really sloppy way, like hitting the back of my head, and kind of wrestled me down to the floor. I mean, it felt to me like I didn't even have a fair shot, because I wasn't facing him or looking at him. I was walking away from him. Or else, I would have at this point even I would have tried to defend myself more, but I didn't. I kind of felt like it didn't see it coming, and he just wrestled me down to the ground. And I remember he was screaming at me. I mean, like really screaming loud. And what I remember of that is trying to get up and him kind of wrestling me back down, and at one point put his knee on my back. It was kind of like kneeling on my back. And I just had this struggle with him. And I look at him, and he's still got his glasses on. I just remember looking at him and thinking that was so... he just looked like he hadn't been through anything. He still had his glasses on, sunglasses. And he was screaming at me that he hated me, that it was over, that he didn't want to marry me. He was disgusted. He was disgusted. He made this mistake. It was a big mistake. And everyone hated me. And I remember crying on the floor. Just, more than anything, I was heartbroken. I thought maybe he was serious. I thought maybe, God, he doesn't love me. Maybe he really feels this way. It broke my heart. Broke my heart. I wanted to marry him so bad. This is the man I loved, Yes, it was awful at times, but I loved him, and what he was saying.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Overruled.
What he was saying to me hurt just as bad as anything else. I just remember that he left me on the closet floor, and as embarrassing or as embarrassing as it is to say, I went up to him at some point. I don't know how much time had passed. He was sitting at the piano in the living room of the hotel room that we had. It's so... I know it may be hard to understand. It's hard for me to hear myself say, but I felt... I just wanted it to stop. I wanted things to just be okay. And I just sat next to him on the piano, and I just laid my head on his shoulder, and of course I was mad. Of course I was mad and felt it was horrible what he'd done. But on the other hand, I wanted us to be okay. I could just put I could put the physical stuff in a box, and I just kept going back on how much I love this person. So just put my makeup on and went to the premiere with him and walked the red carpet with him. And I remember in the car checking my phone obsessively for pictures because my dress was backless. Of all times to have a backless dress. And then I was just looking at pictures of us on the red carpet. It was surreal because I was checking for bruises and making sure that there would be no marks on me, and we just looked like this other thing on this red carpet when it was just... It was not like that. It's embarrassing. It's hard to... I'm sure it's hard to...
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
I'm going to take you to February, the next month, 2015, to your wedding. Can you please tell the jury about your wedding?
So we get married in Los Angeles. I get a sense that it was wedding, running around Los Angeles. I was getting married that day, and I remember running around I went to therapy and, got ready, and Johnny and I met at the penthouses downtown, and I wore a white dress and a veil, a bobby pinned in my hair. And I walked out of that penthouse. I met with Johnny in the hallway, and I thought he looked so handsome, and he seemed happy, and I felt we were making the right decision. I was so looking forward to having this. I thought we'd get married and we'd have stability, safety. So we get in the car, we get into actually Johnny's car, and for the second time since I've known Johnny, he drove drove us in his truck. It was weird being in the car with him alone. We didn't have that. And we drove to his mom's house, and a justice of the peace arrived, looking kind of surprised. And she married us in the living room of his mother's house, Betty Sue, with our families together. My best friend, my mom, his mom, We ate food with the kids. They were there. And we had a wonderful evening, and then got up and got on the plane either the next morning or the day after, and flew to Johnny's Island. And we had what we had planned for the better, we had planned for the better part of a year or so, maybe 8 months, for this 3-day wedding on his island with our close friends, about 12 people, maybe 15 people. We had these little houses built, like not tents, but not houses, these little, for the guests. We had them built and designed on the island, and we had people come out, and it was magic. I was marrying the love of my life. It was complicated. But I thought it was the love of my life. And we had our friends and family out, and we had this 3-day event. The first night of which was supposed to be he and I separate with our relative party. So me with the bridal party and him with his fellas. The bridal party, we had planned to do a cuddle puddle, have mushrooms and drink wine, and have our own girl party separate, and then the next day have the wedding festivities. We were going to be married around sunset, and on this beach, not the beach that Johnny had named for me, although I think we originally planned on having the ceremony on that beach, but it was changed at some point to the other beach, and we walked down the beach aisle, and said our vows, and the sunset behind us, and we took pictures with our family, and we shot the bird, meaning the middle finger, up at the paparazzi helicopter or plane circling around us while we were on the altar. And we danced and celebrated. And then I left the island because I had to go work.
When you say you left the island and you had to go to work, what were you working on that required that?
I was filming The Danish Girl in London, which is the film that I had been in London for in January when Johnny was hallucinating on the phone with me. I was there doing kind of prep work for that film.
And what, if any, film was Mr. Depp going to at that point?
Well, the plan, why we did the wedding when we did it, is because he had always had this commitment to do Pirates 5. And he was going to shoot that in Australia, and I was going to shoot The Danish Girl. And I started The Danish Girl in early February, and he was going to fly out mid-February to Australia. So his movie was going to take the majority of the year, meaning until August. So maybe longer, so that the plan was to do it when we did it so that we didn't have to wait until the fall of the following year. So shortly after I left, Johnny returned to Los Angeles and then flew from Los Angeles on to Australia to shoot Pirates 5, excuse me.
Okay. And what was the plan for you when you finished with Danish Girl?
The plan was always for me to wrap on my movie and then come and join him in Australia, where he was filming Pirates 5.
Okay, and when approximately was that?
That was March 3rd.
March 3rd that you wrapped, that you finished with Danish Girl?
I believe, I can't recall the exact date, but I believe it was around that time, yes.
Okay, and then tell the jury, where did you fly to get to Australia? How long of a turnaround was it for you to get to Australia?
It was about 24 hour, I think it's about 24 hours. I could be mistaken on the exact amount of time, but I remember it's quite a distance from London. I was filming in London, he was filming in Australia. Effectively, you have to fly 12 hours, stop, get on a different plane, and fly, I think, around the same amount of time, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So when you arrived, before you finished rapping with Danish Girl and were heading out shortly before, what, if any, communications did you and Mr. Depp have?
Well, at first it was great. Even though we were separated, it was so hard to leave. Leave right after you get married, especially considering that in Johnny and I's relationship, it was always so much worse when I went away to work. That's when problems started. So that was hard, but we communicated pretty consistently, and it was positive until it started to change. I got the sense that he thought I was sleeping with the director, and then it was with the actor I was filming with.
Who was the actor you were filming with?
Eddie Redmayne.
Okay.
I was not that it mattered, but I could do my best to field the accusations, and then they would kind of subside, and I thought things were okay. And one day, right before I'm supposed to fly to Australia, he, I think it was the night before I was supposed to leave to go to Australia, he calls my hotel room, apparently. I had a sense that the phone was ringing. I think I was in the shower at the time, but not much time had passed, and I get a knock on the door, and it was someone from the hotel that I was staying at. The hotel staff had been sent up to the room because Johnny...
Objection calls for hearsay and speculation.
I'll sustain the objection.
So don't tell what the staff said. What happened next?
Then I start communicating with Johnny.
And when you say started, I mean, was he on the phone? Did you call him? What happened here?
He called the room and then my cell phone, and then once I was on the cell phone, he was accusing me of not being in my room, so he called the room, and I had to prove that I was in the room because, by answering the phone. And we had a lengthy kind of circular conversation about where I was and why I didn't answer the phone. Why I didn't answer the phone immediately. He didn't sound like he was connected to reality. It just didn't seem like, to me, it seemed like a previous pattern. I was unsure what to make of it because he wasn't right in front of me, but he was accusing me of what it seemed like is having, I guess, an affair or a reason to not be in the room that I got a sense from him was